Welcome to the JDRC Politics Podcast
with your hosts Ryan Clark and Jay Doherty.
Hello everyone and welcome to the JDRC Politics Podcast. My name is Jay Doherty and I am once again joined by my legendary co-host Ryan Clark. Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. So happy to be here. And I think there's a lot of things we have to report on today. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's totally right. Here on episode 3 of the JDRC podcast. Today, the main issue that we're going to be talking about is the white supremacist rallies that have been going on in Charlottesville, Virginia, and how Donald Trump has kind of condemned this and, talked about this with his fellow people and cabinet members.
More specifically, his failure to directly condemn the white supremacists. And that's been a large factor of the controversy surrounding this. But we'll get more into that.
Later on in the podcast, we're going to get a lot into that. I want to talk about the events, though. I mean, there's been a lot of, fury and outrage by the community of the United States. A lot of, even going from comedians making fun of how he didn't even condemn this or didn't even go take the extra step to condemn Nazis, as wrong and as white supremacists being a bad part of the nation. He didn't directly condemn them. He said it was on both sides, and that caused a lot of tension.
I think the best way to start would just to give some more context for Trump's remarks. I think it would be a good idea to just go through the timeline of the Charlottesville rally, especially since on the news they're just going on the most recent events. So we just kind of want to give you a more bird's eye view for now, just to go through just kind of the progression. So I think Jay had some details. I think some of the protesters were there.
Right.
Starting on August 11th.
Right, on August 11th, a lot of the events began. That was a Friday, by the way. That was when white nationalists marched through the campus of the University of Virginia, saying and shouting a lot of white nationalist and white supremacist Nazi phrases, such as, white lives matter, you will not replace us, Jews will not replace us. So, obviously those are very discriminatory remarks that hopefully the modern America does not agree with.
And this is exactly the sort of thing that a president needs to condemn. And this is the
exactly.
sort of thing that a president needs to say, this is wrong. The president has to have virtues for the country. A president has to have the duty of raising the country, uniting the country, and making sure that these remarks are not part of that.
Yeah, and it really goes back, I'm going to add a little bit of a side note as well, it really goes back to the saying, America first. I mean, all of these people that are, marching, and all the people that they're discriminating against are all American citizens. And as the president, and as saying, America first, he has to condemn that right away, and he didn't do that. He condemned it, not very directly.
And then I think the local newspaper, the Cavalier Daily, they reported that these protesters do not just have a single focused agenda saying they want only a white America.
Mm-hmm.
They were talking about, they were very anti-Semitic, as Jay said, but also homophobic and also heavily misogynistic. And these were the slurs, and they were delivering these phrases, these hateful phrases, to reporters and just people in the community, asking them questions. I don't even know how coherent their message is, because they have their white nationalist message, but on top of that, they're just adding, they say, we're not hating, but really it's just anything hateful, any people that are minorities or marginalized within a society. And it's very clear, made very clear by the reporting done and by the phrases that these people are making.
I think we kind of covered August 11th, which was kind of like the first day, which was a Friday. Then on August 12th, which is a Saturday, the next day, the Unite the Right rally was held in the Emancipation Park, and there was a lot of chaos going on. So actually what happened, for those of you who don't know, was a state of emergency was declared in the morning around 11 a.m. to violence against counter-protesters by the white supremacists and neo-Nazis. And, this is when Donald Trump was saying that it was on both sides. It was, even though the white supremacists started the violence, started the controversy, he said that the violence came from both sides. He should have really done a better job at condemning the white supremacists themselves, because they are the ones who started it.
Absolutely, he said, "We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. And this is the kind of thing, well, it's very clear by looking at the facts that this is not the counter-protesters, the people who were against these hateful ideologies, against minorities, against women. They were being significantly more peaceful, especially, and this is, you can really understand this when you look at when a man who had sympathies with Nazi Germany, he was in support of Nazism. He rammed a car into several people. Many were injured, had to go to the hospital.
And one died.
Exactly. A young woman died, Heather Heyer, and she was protesting against, the white supremacists. And this really shows kind of the hatred, the violence that is so entrenched in these ways of thinking, that we need a president to stand against this, but he failed, and we'll go more into his remarks.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to go more into the remarks, but if you look at it from the position of the white supremacists, that kind of encourages them, because they know the president is not going to directly condemn them, and that's not good for them, it's not good for any part of America. It just kind of encourages crime. Also, the person, you were talking about the car, the guy who ran into those people, and, throughout the whole day, one person was killed. The ramming was actually declared by H.R. McMaster, who is one of Donald Trump's top national security advisors. He declared it as an act of, quote, domestic terrorism. So, Ryan, I know that you have been researching his statements a lot, and we know a lot about it. Tell the viewers and the listeners about, his statement and how he handled this.
Yeah, so first I'll just repeat some of the things I said that he said, and I'll just extend that a little more. So, in his first statement, Trump said, and this was from a private home in New Jersey. He said, "We all must be united and condemn all that hate stands for. There's no place for this kind of violence in America. Let's come together as one. We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. He added, "What is vital now is a swift restoration of law and order." And so, reportedly, this statement was influenced and it was advocated for by Steve Bannon, who is known to be the founder of Breitbart News, which has strong alt-right ties.
Yeah.
And their reporting is very biased in that way. And I think there's a lot of a lot of people believe, and it's probably true, Bannon didn't want to lose his alt-right support, and this is a very vaguely worded statement. And so for that reason, the Congressional Black Caucus, I think, rightfully declared this statement. They said it was an example of dog whistle politics and false equivalency. And the NAACP implored Trump to remove Steve Bannon from his position, and the statement shows that he is influencing Trump to not be the person that America needs, not condemning this hate. It's just these vague words are not going to have any effect at all. They're more, they don't really do anything. And this statement was heavily condemned by media and major figures such as the ones we mentioned and many, many others. So Jay, can you tell us more about what happened the next day and that following day on August 14th and August 13th, and on August 14th, when he finally, after a lot of pressure, delivered his second statement? Can we hear a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I just want to start with August 13th. There were a lot of vigils and counter-protests that occurred the day following the rally. So,
And the vigils were for Heather Heyer.
yes,
obviously.
who was tragically killed by the white supremacists and just in the rally overall. And that was kind of a sad day. But that was really when the counter-protests started to kick in, and Donald Trump and many people realized that this was a big problem. These rallies were big. And Donald Trump took kind of a while to condemn Heather Heyer and her tragic death. Just 9 hours ago, this morning on Wednesday, August 16th, Donald Trump said in a tweet, quote, "Memorial service today for a beautiful and incredible Heather Heyer, a truly special young woman. She will be remembered by all." And her mother actually thanked Donald Trump for the words of comfort. Then on August 14th, this is when the White House really reacted to this. And President Trump said, quote, "To anyone who acted criminal in this weekend's racist violence, you will be held fully accountable. Justice will be delivered." Then he went on to say, "Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans." So there you can see him condemning white supremacy, but he's still not just condemning white supremacy. He is also, saying that the hate was coming from both sides. It's not singling them out as he should.
And it was Trump was very reluctant to make this statement, and I think that fact demonstrates a lot more about kind of the
attitude
the
he
motives,
has.
right? And I think he only made it. He was motivated by the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, especially after this media backlash. And I think this further demonstrates there's a lot of tension within the White House. And I think the NAACP president,
Cornell William Brooks, he
Right.
made a statement that said that it was a rhetorical minimum.
right? And people were still dissatisfied with this statement. It was definitely an improvement, but he was the many sides kind of aspect of this statement was very worrying because no counter-protesters were advocating against racism or murdering people, and there's no major fighting. So
Yeah, and it was not good at all. Even the fired communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, said that he admitted that Donald Trump's statement condemning this was late. So he kind of goes along with those American people, even though he's so near and dear to the president.
and he did. Anthony Scaramucci did say there's a lot of infighting going on
In the
this
White House, yeah.
conflicting ideologies. So then on the 16th, and the media were still heavy reporting on this because of all the backlash, the fury over his comments. He held a Q&A with the press at Trump Tower. Some of the excerpts from his quote include, "Not all of those people were neo-Nazis. Believe me, not all of those people were white supremacists by any stretch." He also said that there were very fine people on both sides. And I think, Jay, didn't he make some statements about the statues and things being removed?
Yes, and he really said that liberals would attempt to remove the statues. He was suggesting that liberals would attempt to remove the statues of both Thomas Jefferson and George Washington.
And I do recall, he was challenging the media, he was trying to provoke them to make a statement. I don't think any major liberal groups have said that they would advocate for this. It's something that most American people have accepted, that even though maybe some of the founders did some things that were ethically wrong, they're very important to history. And I think many of the statues being removed are more people involved in the actual Civil War on the Confederate side.
Yeah, so there's actually there's a whole other side to this. There's the White House, there's the press, there's the civilians, there's also Congress. How is I know, Ryan, you know a little bit about how Congress is acting with this.
A huge number of congressmen and congresswomen condemn these statements. There was over 60 both Democratic and Republican members. Some of these people include Senator Bernie Sanders and John McCain, and House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi said, "The president's continued talk of blame on, quote, on many sides ignores the abhorrent evil of white supremacism." And I think I agree with this.
Yeah.
Trump's initial failure to directly condemn, to get to the heart the evils that occurred in Charlottesville was a failure of his.
So yeah, she's Nancy Pelosi and her fellow Democrats are clearly outraged with this statement. Even some Republicans, as you mentioned, John McCain was talking about this, and he is not satisfied at all. And even on the independent side, Bernie Sanders is not at all, condemning this or is not at all happy with Donald Trump's response, and they think that Donald Trump really needs to step out and go that extra step to really condemn and single out the white supremacists and the people who started the violence.
And I remember Trump's tweet on no White House chaos. That happened a few days ago.
Right.
Which was kind of ridiculous, especially considering but I think the events in the last couple of days have really shown the inner White House tensions, how that Trump was persuaded by Steve Bannon to make a statement, and then because of all the backlash, he had to change that statement, or he had to augment it to deliver what people thought was right, and he needed persuasion by his chief of staff. So I think, it shows, it paints a more detailed portrait of the White House and how it's not being as successful as Trump has claimed or has wanted.
Yeah, I mean, and just the stubbornness of him not wanting to single out those white supremacists really does not reflect good on just the president himself, but also his cabinet and just the whole country as a whole, to other countries, to Britain and to, close allies of the United States. It does not reflect well to them or any other country that is close allies with the United States, and even people who are not allies with the United States.
And it's a mistake that Trump is making. Only 27% of people thought that his statements were adequate.
Exactly.
So essentially, Trump is kind of almost alienating. Well, not 73%, but 73% think that this was not adequate, and this shows that Trump is not really looking at the facts of what the American people want. Not only what the American people want, but what they need. A leader who's going to condemn racism to unify the country, and this is one of the chief failures of Trump in the last couple of days.
Right, for sure. It was kind of just overall a very bad, I would say, bad week starting on Friday, and it's probably going to keep going on. And if he does not condemn this, people are going to continue being outraged. Even his supporters might be outraged. So, I think we talked about a lot. This whole podcast was kind of focused on the Charlottesville, Virginia tragedies. Ryan, I think this is a great place to wrap it up. I thank you so much for talking about this with me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
The table.
Yeah, it was great. And I just want to say to all of our listeners, thank you so much for listening to this all the way through. We really, really appreciate it. And we just want to say thank you for all of your contributions. Please consider subscribing if you enjoy the podcast and if you want to see more. That's going to wrap it up for this episode number 3 of the JDRC podcast. See you next time.